Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Digging for Donors, Your Database as a Mine. My name is Rachel Escobedo and I will be your facilitator today. This is our mission statement. We aim to help nonprofits significantly increase their fundraising capabilities and the impact they have in their communities and society through proven contemporary curriculum presented by world-class nonprofit leaders, best-in-class faculty, and renowned philanthropists. Shout out to our affiliate partners, including City U of Seattle, Maricopa in Arizona, Xavier University in New Orleans, and the National Leadership Institute in Florida. Our classes have already empowered nearly 27,000 nonprofit leaders, and as you can see, we have received some very positive feedback. If you are on social media, please go ahead and give us a shout out by hashtagging SIP webinar. We would really appreciate that. All right, now let's get to the good stuff. Our speaker today is Kathryn Adams Farrel. I'm going to share a little bit to you guys about Katie. She is the founder and principal consultant for Catalyst, a fundraising and financial management consulting firm for nonprofit organizations. She serves on numerous boards of directors, including the president-elect of the National Association of Women Business Owners in Orange County, treasurer of the Women's Journey Foundation, founder of the Professional Advisors Council at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and is board member for Democracy in Progress PAC. She was also elected and currently serving a 2-year term on the School Site Council at Hicks Canyon Elementary School in Irvine. Katie is a FINRA licensed financial representative and holds a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Music Performance on violin and viola from California State University, Long Beach. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm excited to be here with everyone today. So if you have a chance, thank you for letting me know where you were from. It's wonderful to see such a diverse group of people on the line today. So if you can go ahead and chat something specifically what you're hoping to learn today. If we don't get through that, if we don't address your specific concerns today during the webinar, we have some time at the end for questions, and hopefully we can go through a couple of your questions then. So please take a minute to let us know what you're hoping to learn today. And here are objectives for today. So the name of our webinar is Digging for Donors. So we're going to run through some strategies for mining existing donor data, and we're going to spend some time really understanding how to build our mine. And I'm going really strong with the whole mine analogy today, so bear with me. Free sources of demographic info, we'll go through a few there. There's some examples in our PowerPoint. Using existing data on donors to define our ideal donor. I am going to share with you a scoring system that I've used for some of my clients as well as major gifts programs. And if we have time, I'll go through a few tips for prospecting with current donors. So this is one of the things that I've learned in my career as a financial advisor is that nonprofits could learn a lot from prospecting like a financial advisor. And so when we apply some of those tools to our major gifts programs and just our donor programs generally, we get wonderful results. So we're starting with building our mine. And like I said, we're going to spend a bit of time building our mine today. And there's a few things we need to talk about before we really get started. No two databases are the same. They're all pretty much the same, but they're not built exactly the same, right? They have the same functions, but there are different words that happen throughout the database. So while the words I use to describe fields might be different in your database, the functions are similar, if not identical. So we have a range and the size and scope of nonprofit organizations with us today. So I'm going to work from a really baseline database with no extra modules. So we're not talking about the Cadillac of databases today. If your database has tricks and tips beyond this basic baseline, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, don't worry. We can still get some really good data out of it. Also, you may be concerned about the quality of the data that you have in there right now. Going through this process will help us understand what we need to collect from donors and prospects. So it will also ultimately strengthen your data collection efforts. Okay, so why do I have the pictures of these guys here? I don't know if anyone on the line has seen the show Gold Rush, but I think it's like in its 8th season right now, and I'm a big fan. And it's completely ridiculous. It is a ridiculous show. But I'm always impressed by the science that goes into gold mining. Like, they are really dirty and dropping a lot of curse words and doing some serious engineering. And I think it's really cool. So there's a lot of different personalities on the show. You've got the guy that'll spend money like on anything. The young disruptor innovator, that's Parker. The classic miner with these like tried and true strategies. And then there's some other guys that aren't pictured here that will just like literally do anything to find gold, and they go for broke and they do crazy stuff. And I hope they don't die. But they all go through problems. They all find gold eventually, and they take turns being the most successful miner during the season. So the moral of this story is that there's no one size fits all model for mining. Everyone has their own approach. Some of the strategies I show you today might not be relevant to your organization, or they might just not be your style, and that's totally okay. So feel free to take what you hear from me and make it your own. And if you need a little extra help in making it your own, I'm just an email away, and my contact information is at the end of this presentation. Okay, so we're getting started right away. Mining starts with a survey. I'm really, like, to warn you again, I'm really going strong with this mining analogy. It's the whole presentation. So, get really comfortable with it, because we are mining for gold today. Just a note, I have a formatted Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to send you that you can plop this data that we're going to review into to give you the full picture. It'll be like your topographic map. So don't worry, even if we go a little bit fast today, that's okay, because you're going to get the formatted workbook and you'll be able to, relive all this in real time on from your own database. So let's start with our survey, which is really just something I'm sure that you review on a hopefully quite frequent basis. Your total revenue and revenue by source for at least 3 fiscal years. It's individuals, board, foundations, corporations, government, fundraising events. You may have specific program areas that you break down, whether that's in your P&L or your audit, that's totally fine. But the general source categories for your contributed revenue, that's what we want to see, and we want to be able to look at this over a period of at least 3 years so that we can understand our performance over time. And then we're moving into our snapshot. We want to know really what the number of donors and the number of gifts are, total and per source, so that we can figure out what our revenue per gift is. So, basic math here, and we're going to do this math a number of times. Total revenue divided by total number of gifts equals revenue per gift, right? Super basic. We can do the same thing with donors. So if your donors tend to give more than once per year, which is awesome, lucky you, you can divide your total revenue by your total donors to find out your average revenue per donor. So if you have a situation where you get a huge one-time gift that comes in that's irregular, you can remove it or not, but be sure to put a note in there in your workbook so that you understand how it's affecting your trends, your overall revenue. You'll want that explanation available, especially if you are, going to talk with your supervisors or your board members and using this data to start conversations. The board members always try to find that one thing that doesn't look like the rest, and that's exactly what they should do. It's what I do as a board member too. So we just have to be prepared. All right. Moving to the next slide, mining renewing donors. So on this slide, you can see that I've listed our measures for renewing donors. Some databases call them retained donors. I do a lot of work in Donor Perfect these days, and I think they refer to it as retained donors. So really, again, we're just doing the same math over and over again with different segments, right? We have our revenue from renewing donors divided by the number of gifts from renewing donors. It gives you revenue per gift for renewing donors. But we're not just looking at the revenue per gift from renewing donors. We want to really understand our donor retention rate. Some databases will pull this for you. So there may be a fancy report that you have already that you can access from your database. Others won't, but you can pull the data yourself and export it into an Excel spreadsheet and get there either way. So if your database doesn't pull it for you, create a query of all gifts from January 1, 2016 to December 31, 2017, and you're going to break it down in columns. So you have the donor name, and then you have their gifts in 2016 and their gifts in 2017 when you export it into Excel. And it doesn't really matter how you sort them. I like to sort by gift size because I like seeing big gifts, but feel free to sort, alphabetically if that feels better to you. Make sure that you know what the total number of donors are, like not just the revenue, the total number of donors for 2016, because that's part of the donor retention rate math that you see there on the screen. So then you can use your conditional formatting tool to highlight empty cells. So you can remove the entire row where there's an empty cell. I like to save them, so don't just delete them, but save them elsewhere, because those people are they're one of two groups. They're either your new donors in 2017 or your lapsed donors in 2017, both of which we're going to talk about later as being segments that we're mining from. So the data that you have left then is just your repeat donors in 2017. And then you can do the math, right? So we have the number of repeat donors in 2017 divided by the number of donors in 2016, and that's our retention rate. Don't just divide total donors in 2016 by total donors in 2017, because that's not actually a retention rate. That's a growth rate. So it's valuable, but it's not retention. All right. So mining new donors. Here we go with our good old math. Good thing you saved those puppies, right? Those new donors in 2017. So though this math really helps us understand our revenue per new donor gift, we also want to see trends year over year. So say we have 87 new donors in 2015, 169 in 2016. I'm just going to make up numbers. And 91 in 2017. Clearly there's something special going on in 2016. Did we have an exceptional exhibition? Did we do an extra event? Did we run a crowdfunding campaign? Was there some sort of, political event that led to more interest in our cause, et cetera, et cetera? So we want to be able to see specifically in new donors, what we're doing over time that's bringing them in. Okay, reactivated donors. Reactivated donors are a very special segment. And here we go again with exactly the same math. So if you're pulling this data together manually, you're going to need to do another query, and it gets a little bit more complicated for reactivated donors. You're going to need to pull 3 years of donor gifts. You can do it with more years if you like, but you might then spend another 2 weeks sorting data. So I don't, I recommend doing these strategies, chunking them down as much as possible in order to really understand the relevance and success of specific programs. So, so here we go, though. We're going to pull out 3 years of donor gifts. We're going to conditional format to highlight any empty cells, and we remove any lines that don't have text, highlight text. So basically, 2015 should have text, 2016 is not going to have anything, so it's going to be highlighted, and then 2017 will have text again. Those are the lines that we remove because those are our reactivated donors, right? So I know math is so wonderful, but here we're doing it again with our revenue from reactivated donors divided by the number of donor gifts. It is our revenue per reactivated donor gift. So we can, review all of this data over time to understand what our mine is looking like. So fine, like we've done some math and we're feeling really smart and stuff, but what's the actual point? Also, we may be building a spreadsheet that has really pretty colors, but literally, what is the point? Like, why are we doing all of this? And it's because we're analyzing our trends and performance over time. Are we meeting our goals? What are we missing? So this snapshot is really critical to helping us understand how healthy our fundraising operation is. Are these activities generating more revenue or more donors year over year? In what ways? What did we do differently? Once we know what the data says, we can figure out why. And the beauty of this system is that we can chunk it down with any segments of donors over time for your annual fundraiser, for only major gifts, which I highly recommend. You can narrow it down by a period of time, like say when you were running a certain ad campaign, when you had a certain performance. You can compare events or time periods like winter break versus spring break, although that might be kind of silly because that's year end versus tax time. I think we all know what happens then, but still you get the point. I feel like fall is a really busy time for grants. Is that actually true? You know, I could do this analysis on just my foundations program and understand when actually is our busiest time for grants. And likely you have a grants calendar and already know this, but it's just an example. So specifically, our renewals help us understand how well we're stewarding our donors and if our programs are remaining relevant. Retention rates are really specific to organizations and industries. So, you know, you need to do a little work on understanding what your what a good retention rate is for your organization. But you can say generally that if you're below 65%, you need to spend some serious time understanding what your donors need from you and building a stronger stewardship plan. So new donors help us understand how good we're doing at prospecting. Now, if you're not doing prospecting, that's something we talked about a little bit earlier, but we're going to work on it. I'm hoping we have some time to get to those strategies at the end. But if not, I really do mean that. Please email me and I'm happy to give you some pointers because I think that all of us could greatly benefit from incorporating better prospecting into our gift strategies. So new donors, also a measure of cultivation efforts and how willing are we to make that ask. So I read a report not that long ago that the number one thing that holds back fundraisers is that they're scared to make the ask, which is, you know, sad. But I think if we're more prepared, then we'll feel more comfortable making that ask because we could potentially keep one of our prospects that's friendly and cultivation forever. You know, we like them. We just never quite get to asking them. And so we never quite get to finding that gold. And reactivated donors are usually a measure of how you've changed. So donors fall off because you're just not doing it for them anymore. If then they come back, it's because they didn't want to fall off in the first place, which means you probably need to fix your stewardship plan so you're having better communication. Or they had a personal issue, in which, of course, you give them hugs and kisses. Or because they think you've changed and you're doing awesome again. So take the time to find out why a person fell off and came back. It's an important segment. It can tell you so much about the effectiveness of your activities, the organization's activities, and your own performance as a fundraiser. So we went through quite a bit in a very short period of time. If there's any questions, please, don't hesitate to send them through chat, and we're going to come back and get to them at the end. So I promise to address those at the end, and thank you for the people who have already submitted their questions. Okay, so digging in our mind. Now that we have the lay of the land, we want to get busy, right? We want to get to the work. We want to find gold. The best thing is that by doing this work on building our mine, we've created natural access points to the people that are our best targets. So it's not just because we like to do math or we don't like to do math and we're masochists. It's that by doing this work, we really are narrowing it down and pulling out those targets. So either via your database's function reports or by the cutting and pasting we did earlier, you have built in segments of new, renewing, and reactivated donors. In chopping up your queries to get to the renewing donors, you've also saved lapsed donors. So again, we're going to send you this workbook template in the next couple of days, so you'll have it. So don't stress out on that. Nuggets, isn't that pretty? That's such a pretty picture. I don't think they actually find nuggets like that anymore. Those are like,
It wouldn't surprise me. That's a big one.
it's a big nugget. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind one though.
I worked at the Natural History Museum in LA for a long time, and they have the world's largest collection of gold nuggets.
Wow. There's your fact for the day, everyone.
You should go see it. It's pretty interesting.
I love it.
Okay, so nuggets. A general rule of thumb is that it takes less energy to ask a donor to upgrade or to bring back a donor who has lapsed, unless you did something to really upset them, in which case you should make a note in your database and give yourself a hug and like seriously just move on. Don't try to gain back somebody that's super upset. Let's not waste our time. So these are some targets that you might want to address first and foremost. Renewing donors who have given for 3 years in a row with no increase. These are people who are loyal to you. You either know them well or they're really super loyal to the cause. Either way, it might be time to ask for an upgrade. If they are retirees on a fixed income, I hear this a lot actually. Well, they're retirees on a fixed income, so I can't ask them for an upgrade. And I understand that, of course. At the same time, the amount of income that people need to spend in retirement goes down. Need to spend on themselves goes down as they age. So actually asking retirees for an upgrade is a totally legitimate thing to do as long as you have a good relationship with them, of course. Reactivated donors. I've spent a little time talking about them today. The reactivated donors are seriously an important segment to understand because it shows that it shows a correction. And so, please spend some time with your reactivated donors. And then new donors, this may seem like, this is a ridiculous thing to say, but new donors that have given $500 or more that you don't know. People give online these days, especially when we're doing a good job of prospecting and working with our board members and loyal donors. They will talk to their friends, and their friends will make gifts online that you don't even know happened. So it's important to pull these reports on a regular basis. It's important to understand who these donors are. Somebody that gives $500 can likely give quite a bit more than that. So it's a good place to start for major gifts. One thing that I didn't put on here, so not everyone tracks guests at fundraising events, but if you do, those are great nuggets. If you don't, you should try to find a way to start, even if it's keeping it Excel and then inputting it in your database after. Even if you don't have their contact information, because it's not that difficult to go back to the person who purchased the table and say, listen, I'd really like to follow up with so-and-so, but I don't have their contact info. Can you share it with me? Then, hey, donor, I can't remember who was sitting at your table. Can you tell me again? Like that's not going to really work as well. So take the time to try to keep that information as much as you can. All right, Flakes and Specs. I don't know that those are actually technical terms for pieces of gold, but I think that it makes sense to me. So a zip code sort. Of course, this is an easy thing to do. It does require some research because you have to understand what zip codes are affluent and what zip codes aren't. But it's a good place to start. A zip code sort is, if you're worried about the quality of your data, do a quick zip code sort. You have yourself a built-in, albeit cold, major gifts portfolio. Frequent ticket buyers. I see this one a lot, right? Like literally I see organizations that are sitting right on top of their gold mines. They have people who have bought tickets to 4 events in a year and have done that for multiple years, but they haven't become part of an individual giving program, or they haven't stepped up their buying, their giving. So frequent ticket buyers are a huge hot source right there. High bidders, but not necessarily winners at your fundraising events. And then anyone that has opted to make an additional donation from your website at checkout. If they're buying a ticket on your website or buying a ticket through Eventbrite or PayPal or however it might be, and they opt to make an additional donation, that shows a very high level of inclination. And so those are great philanthropic prospects. Free tools. There is no perfect instrument. You may, if you are heading into a campaign or a period of serious growth and you would like to invest in some actual tools, I recommend it. Start with these free resources first to understand what you can do on your own. There are also companies who do prospect research for a pretty nominal price. If you don't have a prospect researcher and you don't want your major gifts officer spending all of their time doing prospect research, there are companies who do that specifically for you. And it may not be the highest quality of information that you would glean about a person, but it's a really, really good place to start. And I think something that more nonprofits, especially smaller nonprofits, could take advantage of. So there's this new program. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Donor Search, but dsgiving.com, and you plug in a person's name and it brings up records of their giving. A lot of the records will end up being political in nature because those are more easily accessible because they are required by law to be public. But it really does give a lot of information. And so it's in its beta testing stage right now, but it's a totally free resource. You can also download an app on your phone if you want to get really fancy with it. So I recommend you go ahead and test out dsgiving.com. It's pretty cool. Of course, foundationcenter.org and guidestar.org are wonderful sources of information for foundations. FEC.gov, political contributions. If you see people that are making, political fundraising and philanthropic fundraising are different. I don't want to, mix the two that much. They're different. But if you see somebody that's giving to a political, that is staunchly giving to political campaigns, over a period of years, I think they probably are a good prospect for philanthropic gifts as well. The marqueewho'swho.com. So Marquee Who's Who has a service that you can pay for, but there's also a free trial. So, if you're thinking about launching into a campaign and what kind of resources might be good, check out the Marquee Who's Who. And if you go with a service provider like Wealth Engine, for example, they glean from all of these resources for you, including Marquee's Who's Who. Zillow.com helps you understand real estate. Zoom Info and LinkedIn are wonderful for business connections. You can see titles. So titles help you understand income. Then also, who do you need to contact in corporate social responsibility at such and such. Esri.com, the tapestry at Esri.com is one of my ultimate favorite tools. We're going to talk about it more in a second. And then Google, there's so much you can learn from Google, right? Okay, so Esri is a super cool resource. I absolutely love it. So you go to the website that was on the previous slide, and you can insert a zip code in order to understand information about the people that live there. So I'm just going to read you this quick thing from Esri's website. It's called tapestry segmentation. So tapestry segmentation provides an accurate, detailed description of America's neighborhoods. U.S. residential areas are divided into 67 distinctive segments based on their socioeconomic and demographic composition. They dive down pretty deep. So there's like life mode 1, affluent estates, and it gives you some pointers. Established, wealth-educated, well-traveled, married couples. Accustomed to more, less than 10% of all households. Homeowners, almost 90%. Married couple families with children ranging from grade school to college. So, I'm not going to keep going with this, but it helps you understand who are the people. If you do a zip code sort and you see that there are a ton of people from, my zip code up there is Irvine 92602, it will pull up a number of life modes, and you can understand what's appealing to them. This is also really helpful in sponsorship proposals. So if you're putting together a proposal for, say, a car company, and you pull up boom burbs and it says that 90% of them have a minivan, that's a pretty good thing to say specifically, to this car company, this is who we have involved here, and this is how we can help you sell cars. So I especially like it for sponsorship proposals. It also gives you some ideas for prospect scoring, which we're going to talk about in just a second when we build our ideal donor. Like I said, just a second, ideal donor. What we are versus what we can be. So with our ideal donor, the important thing to understand about our ideal donor is that we might not have this donor today, and that's okay. We're from doing all of this data analysis. We've really understood who our average donor is. And so the opportunity is to see who our ideal donor is, and then put strategies in place so that we can move from the average donor to the ideal donor. And that may be through upgrading certain donors or bringing in new donors. Either way, it's all good, right? So one of the ways that I like to help people understand what their ideal donor can be is through donor scoring. So this is an easy system that you can do in Excel, but you can also do in your database by just creating an attribute record or a note record. If you end up going with a company like Wealth Engine, they give you these types of scores, major gift scores. There's a lot more that goes into it. This is very simple, but it helps us build a portfolio from a database. So we start with identifying 5 measurable qualities. We want a few qualities that indicate their capacity to give, and a few qualities that indicate their inclination to give. So here's some examples. A capacity quality might be income range. If you don't know their income range, maybe you can just go by their title. A capacity is that they make big gifts elsewhere. Capacity is that they live in certain zip codes. An inclination is a measure of how inclined they are to make a gift tomorrow. So, for example, comes to lots of events or makes gifts every year. Or measures like, are they an alumni? If you work at a hospital, has a family member or they themselves recovered from an illness? Are they an art collector if you work at a museum? Some of these things will be anecdotal and obvious, and that's totally okay because this system is really designed to help you just understand who the biggest fish are and go after them first. So a person that you know anecdotally that has an inclination will get a higher score than someone you don't know well, and that's okay. It may turn out that the person you don't know well is actually more inclined, but if you don't know them well, that means that they're not as hot. So, you know, they're going to take a little bit more time anyway. So really the scoring system kind of works out. Also, we work with a block of prospects, so these things are happening concurrently anyways. You can use this same scoring methodology to chunk it down only to fundraising event audiences or a crowdfunding campaign or major gifts, whatever it might be, or you can, you know, work with your entire base. Step 2 is to develop a rubric. Keep it simple. I can't say this enough times. Keep it simple. The 5 stars method is good. But then there are going to be other measures that 5 stars would be too complicated. So like if you're using one like lives in certain zips and you've identified the zips that you think that are near you and the most affluent, give them 0 points if they don't live in that zip and 1 point if they do. So if you start to ranking zips on a 5-star scale, then that's going to get really complicated really fast, but you'll know a whole lot about the place where you live. So maybe that's cool, but it'll take a lot of time. So keep it simple, score them. You can total the rows. So you start with the highest rated prospects first. But you can also use some conditional formatting. And I think you've probably heard me say this a number of times, but I'm a big fan of conditional formatting. I really like highlighters too. So any highlighting is really good for me. So say you have a prospect that is a C-suite executive at a huge company, but they only come to 1 event per year, but they have given. You can conditional format to turn people with a score of 5 in the income column or the title column red. So even if they don't have a high overall score, you're still keeping them top of mind. So I use this system specifically to combat the I don't know where to start, which is really easy when you have a database that maybe you haven't been super specific about maintaining the data. Start with this scoring system. It also helps you understand, you know, who your donors are now. So you can start going after your high scores. You can start with red boxes. You can start wherever you want. But here's the trick about prospect or donor scoring. Don't score for what you have on average today. Score for what you want to have. Score for your best donor. So when we're talking about, let's go back to the income example. If ultimately we want donors that have an income of $250,000 or more, but we don't have those today, we don't give everybody that has an income of $100,000 a score of 5. We give them a score of 3 or 4, and we keep it open, the score of 5 with a $250,000 income or more. So, you know, your best donor today might not even have a perfect score. And that's good because it gives us a place to go, something to shoot for, and some really specific targets, which we super will use in prospecting. So I want to have plenty of time for questions because I think it's important to be able to, we have a lot of questions over there, and I think it's important to be able to relate this data. It's really hard to teach about data on a webinar. So I think it's really important that we have the opportunity to relate these to specific real world questions. But I want to give you these prospecting tips really quick. So one of my favorite things to do with board members that I like and with donors that really like me, I ask them for a coffee specifically so that I can talk to them about their connections in their network. And if you've done a good job with them, they will say yes every single time. So don't just come to that meeting like, okay, now tell me about who you know, because it actually won't work. They'll say, yes, I will email you later with some people I think of, right? That's what's going to happen. So come prepared. Do a donor profile in advance. So if you probably already know that they're a board member at a different organization, or that they're really involved at the theater, or that their kid, is in a private school and they're super involved in fundraising for their private school. So, put those things together in a donor profile because there are likely lots of connections there, and bring a feed list. So, hey, you're on the board of such and such organization. How well do you know such and such? I think they would be a great fit, that kind of thing. Ask specific questions. And this is a really important one. Use active voice. When you say, do you know anyone? People say, nope. So you say, who do you know that? Who do you know that is really interested in environmental causes and you think would really enjoy coming to our event next month? You're going to get you'll get an answer to that question, but do you know anyone? Likely people are just going to be like, oh, I'll think about it. Give them opportunities to be a connector or an influencer. Most people want to be connectors or influencers. Not everybody, but most people do. So give them that opportunity. We'd love to host an event where you invite your friends, right? That kind of stuff. And then follow up immediately. Don't let 2 days go by. Make sure it's that day or the next day, especially if they say something like, oh yeah, here's a name, but I'm going to have to get you that contact information. You're going to have to follow up to get that contact information. So, make sure that as soon as you get back to the office, you get that stuff into your database, and you follow up immediately. Okay. That's my contact information. Go ahead and screenshot it real quick. Do we send them?
Yes, I was just going to say, so the recording and the slides will be sent out after this webinar. Okay. So you'll definitely have a copy.
Oh, nice. Now we're at questions, and we have quite a few, so let's do it.
Okay, so we're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at your question you asked at the very beginning on what did they want to learn, just so we can kind of recap and make sure we address that they're what they wanted to learn. And then there were some questions coming throughout the webinar we will address. And if you have any questions currently, please be sure to add them in the chat box and we will get to you. So when you asked everybody what do they want to learn from this webinar, some people just said basic tips and tricks for finding the gold, how to fundraise without a database.
Oh, well, I think everybody has some sort of database, right? If you don't have a database, first of all, if there are very inexpensive donor databases, cloud-based donor databases that are like, a monthly commitment of $19. So take a look at cloud-based databases. If you have absolutely nothing, you still have Excel. And so you probably have QuickBooks or some sort of accounting software where you are gathering information on who these donors are. And then you have to send them a letter. So you have their information somewhere and enough to start with. So start in Excel, but I would definitely recommend looking at one of those cloud-based platforms. Like I said, Donor Perfect is one that I've worked with a lot, but there's a lot of them.
Great, thank you. Best way to ask friends for donations. an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a totally interesting question. So I'm going to be really like brutally honest right now. Your ability to ask your friends for donations is actually a measure of your own self-confidence. So do what you can. Like if you truly believe in the cause that you're fundraising for, you do what you can to prepare yourself. Make sure you know all the facts and ask your friends for something that's easy. So ask your friends to come to an event before you ask them for a donation. But really, they're your friends and they love you. And what's the worst that can happen? They say no.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
All right. Let's move on to our next one. Let's see. So this is a question. So our organization is attempting to grow to get to the next level for our mission. We've only focused on memberships in the past, but we want to attract more donors. How?
Well, first of all, if you have a membership program, then you are sitting on a donor database, right? So I understand that your members are donors, but the first place to start in cultivating a major gifts portfolio is to start with what you already have in your membership. And so you can use some of the strategies that we outlined for analyzing that data, specifically chunk it down to just your membership. And then when it comes to attracting new donors, how do we attract new donors? Well, I mean, the best way to do that in a significant way is to prospect with your friends, the people that are already loyal to your cause. You can also gather information from if there are organizations like yours or geographically local to yours. Look at who their board of directors are. Oftentimes, they'll also have their annual report on their website, so you can start pulling donors' names from there. Look at causes that are like yours and see who's giving, and so you can start reaching out from there. And perhaps, one of the things that we do a little bit now that I think we're moving towards is collaborative fundraising asks. So, there are crowdfunding campaigns that are collaborative, and there are also events that are collaborative. So basically, you and an organization that may be like yours or maybe not at all like yours go in together, and then you split the revenue. And what you end up with, of course, is probably more revenue, but also a whole list of people that you didn't know before that had a great experience.
Thank you, Katie. All right. This one is a answer to your first question. Someone was interested in learning tips for identifying donors for startup organizations.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely tougher for startup organizations. And that's really when I guess you start with your friends, but certainly, doing an analysis of the landscape, who are the organizations that are like yours and understanding who their donors are. Write a business plan, understand what your giving programs are going to be before you launch them. Don't just start writing a grant because that's not going to work. But do a competitive analysis and understand where you are and where you want to be, and who the players are in the field. And for a startup organization, I would invest a little money in putting some ads on Facebook, especially because Facebook pages are, no longer are sorted differently in Facebook these days. But, you can do some really targeted stuff in Facebook ads. And so I would invest a little bit in that. There's also, direct mail campaigns. Even if you don't want to send out a mailer, they have mail lists. And so you can do an email or mail or whatever campaign by purchasing some lists, and they can be highly targeted as well.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, we have another question here. So, how specifically is Tapestry helpful for sponsorship proposals? Is it in understanding the demographics of our service area?
Yeah, so the reason that a company will sponsor, we're talking about sponsorship here. We're not talking about corporate philanthropy. If we're talking about corporate philanthropy, that's a different thing. And most CSR and corporate philanthropy programs want to help underserved families, children, whatever it might be. In sponsorship, it's about return on investment. So like my example with the car company, if you can say that we have people that are loyal to us, with these characteristics, and these characteristics are also your target market, that's really strong. And, you know, you can say exactly, also take it a step further. This is how we're going to reach out to these people. This is why these people like us so much. And this makes sense with your message. But very specifically, Esri gives you a list of attributes, which you can then use to define your market and make connections to their target market.
Okay, so this next question coming in, I'm going to try to phrase it right. It's kind of chunked out, but it looks like this person is just starting. Their agenda is political. They need sponsors to finance their campaign, from printing of copyrighted manuscripts to distribution and marketing. They'd appreciate any assistance.
Okay, so are you a 501c3 or a PAC? So it's going to depend. Obviously, your strategies are different depending on what the legal requirements of the organization are. There are so many political organizations these days, and like all over the internet, right? I think I maybe get 26 emails a day from various political organizations, and certainly I'm, you know, active politically, so I may get more than other people, but I think that sponsors is not the way that we go, specifically when we're talking about corporate sponsors. I think that we need to apply strategies that are for individuals and cultivating support for your cause based on what people care about. And so really, I think that the best place for starting a political movement, campaign, whatever you want to call it, is Facebook. I know that's, you know, probably not that helpful, and you may even have a good Facebook page, but, you know, generating energy on Facebook leads to generating energy from email, leads to generating energy from donations. Although you also have to put some effort into providing content and not just asking people for money on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you. What do I do about board members who believe fundraising and donor development is only my job?
You start developing new board members. I really don't know how to help that situation, and it's a completely common situation, and those people exist, and it's kind of, you know, if there's a way to gently help them understand why they're a member of the board, that's one thing. Also, it's their fiscal responsibility. The maintenance of the organization is their fiscal responsibility. They've taken that on as a board member. It may be time to bring in a consultant to do a workshop. There are great consultants that do board development workshops, and they're pretty affordable depending on where you go, where you're located. But I think, to be perfectly honest, people are also motivated by their peers. So if you are able to bring on a couple of new board members that are, you know, movers and shakers, connectors, excited about the cause, that's going to go a really long way in either bringing your other board members up or showing them that it's time for them to maybe move on.
Okay, this is a last quick question for you, Katie. This woman's name is Imelda Rhoda, founder of Bright Lights charitable organization, which is a startup. What's the best time to connect with you? And thank you for taking the time today to speak to us.
Sure. So I am pretty reachable via email. I run around quite a bit. If you'd like to call, the best time to connect is definitely in the afternoon. I'm most responsive to email before noon and best by phone afterwards. But if you want to connect by email, I'd be happy to also send over my cell. So my office phone is what is in the contact, but I'd be happy to send over my cell so that we can find a good time to connect.
Thank you. We had one more question coming in. How do you approach a prospect who has never given but lives in the area and has the means to give a large gift?
So I live in Orange County, California, and so that is the situation for pretty much everyone. I have to be perfectly honest. So I love Orange County, and Orange County is actually a philanthropic place, but in a different kind of way, right? There's no long-term legacy of philanthropy in Orange County, but it's being developed. I mean, there are several families, but it's not, it's not Los Angeles, it's not San Diego. And so the coolest thing about Orange County is that I have about fundraising in Orange County is that I have the opportunity to help people understand that they are philanthropists, because a lot of people don't view themselves as philanthropists. And also, a lot of people have a ton of insecurity around money, and we just have to understand that and kind of, help them through. So having them become a part of a community is, I think, the number one way. And whether that's a community of a few or a larger community through events, that sense of belonging is the first step to helping them understand that they want to give in a significant way. Then, of course, like being really specific about the ways that their gift will not only impact your mission, but will be their impact. So, for example, one of my clients is a homeless shelter for women in Orange County, for unaccompanied women experiencing homelessness. And that is a tough issue right now in Orange County, but specifically, we can say your donation will end homelessness for a woman that comes into our program. And so developing really strong messages about impact and connecting them to the other person who's writing the check, that's, kind of the second step. First step, cultivate a friendship. Second step, make really pointed statements about what their impact is going to do for themselves and for the organization.
Okay, thank you so much, Katie. So on that note, unless there are any other questions, we're going to go ahead and move towards the end of this webinar. Katie, do you have any last minute tips, ideas to give to our audience?
Well, I think that, we pulsed through a lot of the stuff in the beginning very quickly, which was, the building of the mine, and that stuff is boring. But I just can't recommend enough that spending the couple of days to really understand who is in your database and who could be in your database, it's really important. Also, looking at that information is the first step to developing performance metrics for yourself or for your team as fundraisers beyond the bottom line. So as a fundraiser, I can write the most amazing grant in the entire world, but once I write it and it's out the door, it is not in my control anymore. It's then in the hands of other people. So it's important to understand that we also need to measure activities that are not just bottom line revenue. Otherwise, if we don't meet our goals, we're just feeling badly. We're feeling badly over and over and over again, and that's no way to perform. So developing metrics from this data that are based on the number of visits, the number of times we actually ask, things that are different from just bottom line revenue.
And I lied, we have one more question that just came in. What is the zip code site?
Oh, so that will be in the presentation. Let me just speed back to it.
And you will all be getting a copy of her slides afterwards, but here's the resources.
Okay, so on the online resources, it's in the second row, the third one over, esri.com/data/tapestry/zip lookup.
Thank you. Oh, and then, another question. Where does DS Giving get its information, and how would it know about all the donations by a person? I'm not sure if you know that question.
I don't actually know that question, but I'm sure it's through that company Donor Search. So I'm sure that they know those questions, but I think you'll just have to read a little bit more on the website. And I'm sorry I don't know the answer to that question. I can always follow up another time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and put our last slide up again, just so that they have our contact information. But again, I want to remind everyone a recording of this webinar will be sent out, as well as the slides, and we will be sending out that Excel document that Katie had mentioned earlier for you to use. We thank you for joining us today. It's been an awesome time having Katie here. She's clearly a wealth of information and has given us a ton of tips and ideas to consider and to really digest throughout the day. So thank you, Katie, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to let you all go. So have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Until next time. Oh, and we do have more webinars coming up, so please check out our website at the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy.org to sign up for our next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Take care.